We are continuing our series today on 1 Thessalonians, like a rock. You know, the perspective that you have in life, it makes a big difference in how you see things. A little girl once asked her mom how the human race, got here, and her mother said, well, let me tell you that story of Adam and Eve. And she asked her dad the same question, and her dad said, well, we evolved from monkeys. And the little girl asked her mom and said, why did Dad have a different story? And her mom thought about it for a second and said, well, he told you about his side of the family, and I told you about my side of the family. The way you see things makes a good deal of difference. Now, we're living in a time when there's a lot of issues going on. There's a lot of trouble. There really is. And it's easy to look at that and think, wow, this is just not fair. It's not fair. Listen, let me tell you something. Trouble happens to everybody. It's just the way things are. If anybody ever told you different than that, if you've heard any prosperity gospel that taught you that, hey, if you're a Christian, that you're not going to go through stuff, it's just not true. Nobody is immune to trouble, not even the president. It's what happens. And it's universal and inevitable. Now, every once in a while, you'll meet somebody that you think, wow, they just seem to have the golden touch, and everything goes right with them. Guess what? They thought that about Job in the Bible. He had a big family, happy family. He had plenty of things, and then all at once, he lost everything. If you're a human, you're going to go through troubles. It's just part of life, and to realize that that's a part of life, it gives you a different frame. Paul went through all kinds of troubles, and yet, even though when he was in jail, in prison cell, he wrote this, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." That's pretty good perspective, isn't it? For our light and momentary troubles. Well, we thought this trouble with the virus would not last as long as it has, didn't we? But it's going on longer. But know that God can get you through stuff, all kinds of things. Romans, Paul says, all these things we're more than conquerors through him who loved us. And this letter was written by Paul to a church who are going through persecution and troubles. And this chapter is him congratulating them on their faithfulness and their endurance as they went through these tough times. And so I want to talk today about how they did that. What was it that got them through those things? And we're going to look at three things. It's real simple. First off, they were mentally prepared. And so you got to prepare yourself mentally to know that troubles happen. In verse 4, it says, "In fact, we were with you. We kept telling you that you would be persecuted." It was just a fact of life. And as it turned out that way, as you well know, they were persecuted. And they had to deal with it. Paul left the town that they were a part of because he was being attacked and chased off, really. He had to leave. In 1 Peter, there's another scripture that's about this. It says, "Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange or happening to you." So if you're wondering, well, why is all this happening to me? You ever get that way? You ever think that thought? Something happens in your life you didn't expect. You said, why? Why does this happen to me? Well, Paul prepared them mentally so that they would not go around thinking, that's not going to happen to us. Many years ago, when the kids were little, I was taking them to school, to the elementary school in Greenbrier in Chesapeake, and it was a busy morning, and I dropped one up. By the way, there were some mornings, if I got them dressed and they ate something and got to school on time, it was a miracle. It really was. And somehow I got them to school, and I backed out of the parking lot, and the lady was coming real fast, and she ran into the back of my car. And it wasn't a big deal. It was like a little dent. But in her mind, it was like the world just fell in on her head. And she like went pretty nutsy, all right, because of that. And I'm reminded also of visiting New York City. And I was with a group of pastors, and we got a taxi. You ever gotten a taxi in New York City? Whew. You're just kind of held hostage while this crazy person drives around. And I was really white-knuckling it, okay? He was like cutting in front of cars, and he cut in front of another taxi, and the other taxi bumped him on purpose. The whole taxi shook. And I thought, whoa, is he going to call the cops or something? You know what he did? Nothing. Because that was the first wreck he'd had in the last 3 hours. He was used to that. He was used to it. He expected, and so it didn't cause him stress because he expected to have a bump now and then. He expected turmoil. This is what I expect. Imagine if you were going to get a hotel room somewhere. And before you opened the door to the hotel room, they told you that you were getting the honeymoon suite. And it was the best room they got. And you open it up and it's just a regular room. What would you think? What a dump. At the same time, what if you checked into a hotel and somebody told you it was like a prison cell? And that's what the hotel was like. And you opened up and it was a regular room. What would you think? Oh, this is pretty nice. What's the difference? The way you think about it. And so what I'm reminding all of us here today is that you need to expect trouble. Trouble's going to happen. And even if you follow Christ, trouble is going to happen. In fact, I think the devil comes at you stronger when you are following Christ. I mean, before then, there's no reason for him to take you out. But when you make peace with God, that means that you're no longer at peace with the devil, okay? I mean, you think about back in World War II, Switzerland, when they never declared themselves, as part of a side. Why? They maintained neutrality because they didn't want to be attacked by anybody. When you say, I'm no longer neutral, but I'm going to be a Christian, that's when you're opening yourself up to the devil to come against you. And the more that you do good for God, you're going to have God's enemies come against you. And that's just the way it is. And so to know that, it's what they knew in this church that was in this town. They realized that people were going to come against them, that things were going to happen. And so I don't care who you are today. Suppose you run a restaurant, or suppose you work at a store, or whatever it might be. Suppose you're in ministry. You're going to have things come against you. That's the way it is today. That's the lot. I know when I was growing up, I used to hear stories from my grandfather about the Depression. You ever hear stories? Some of you all went through it, I guess. Some of us may have. But I heard lots of stories about, going to school uphill both ways in the snow and how tough it was. And it was tough. We make fun of it, but it was tough. This is our stories, what we're going through right now. And one day, kids and grandkids are going to ask us, remember when that happened? Did that really happen? Did y'all not have homecoming that Sunday? And we're going to say, yep, that happened. We went through that. Maybe that's where we are right now. And it may not get better for a while. Letting you know. Second, latch on to your Timothy. Paul said, so when we could stand it no longer, we thought it'd be best to be left by ourselves in Athens. And what Paul is saying is he really wanted to go back and check on this church. He wanted to really strongly, he had this urge to go back and check on them, but he couldn't. I was thinking about that this week. There are people in our church fellowship right now that we have not had in our church fellowship since March, that we dearly love, that are part of our fellowship. And I hope you feel like Paul did. We feel sometimes like we can't stand it no longer. Last week, Gene Burleson, I got to talk with. I miss Gene. Great man. And he's having to be careful, like a lot of people. It makes absolute sense. He's very vulnerable. And so he is He still gets out in his yard and he cuts his grass. He probably is going to go hunting this year, He goes hunting every year. He never kills a whole lot, but he goes hunting every year. That's what Jim Newman says. I didn't say it. Jim Newman says that. But we miss these folks, and they just can't be here right now, and so we lift them up with our prayers. And Paul says when he could stand it no longer, he sent Timothy. We sent Timothy, who is our brother and co-worker in God's service in spreading the gospel of Christ, to strengthen and encourage you in your faith. Now, I bet you some of those people were thinking, well, where is Paul? Paul started this church, and now we're going through this stuff, and where is Paul? He couldn't come. So he said Timothy. Was Timothy an apostle? Nope. No. He was just a young guy. He wasn't an apostle. He wasn't the great leaders. And Paul says, I couldn't come, but I'm sending Timothy right your way. And I think in a real sense, God sent Timothy. Maybe it wasn't what they were expecting, but it's what they needed. When I was in seminary, there was a course. Dr. Wayne Oates was a professor. It was pastoral care. And he worked teaching chaplains and folks like that, and he was a great man. He cornered the term workaholic. Can you imagine? He came up with, he was just a brilliant man, and he was lecturing on pastoral care, and one of the students was kind of flaky, okay? He wasn't doing his assignments like he should have, and so the professor called him on it, and he was talking to him. He said, well, Doc, he said, I'm just tired of just reading about stuff. I want to do something with my life. And so Dr. Oates said, okay, you want to do something. All right. And so he got him an internship at the hospital in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. I forgot the name of it. But in the ER of this inner city hospital. Very tough place to be. And one of the first weeks he was there, at about 1 a.m, there was a gunshot wound. Person came in. And then his wife came in a little after that, and the guy dies of a gunshot wound. And she is like going off the rails. She is yelling and crying and screaming, and so they called the chaplain. And this young 20-year-old shows up, and she grabs him by the jacket, and starts shaking him and says, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And he, kid has big eyes, and he says, I don't know, what do you want me to do? And then she calms down for a second and says, you're kind of new at this, aren't you? And God gave him the right thing to say. He said, yes, and I think you are too. So maybe God will get us through this night. She needed that Timothy. She needed it. And maybe in your life you have had in the past a Paul that helped you through something, that was a guide to you. And now they have moved on. Maybe they passed away, maybe they moved away, and you think, I just not going to have that again. I know of a guy that he was part of our church, and he loved the church, and he in it for years, and then he moved, I think it was Colorado, and after he moved out there, he just he tried to get involved in another church, but he would say, it's just not the same anymore. And there were people that invited him to their homes and tried to connect with him, but he basically said to me, I think I'm going to give up on church for a while because it's just not the same. What did he want? He wanted Paul. But God said, I've got a Timothy for you in your life and my life. You might be thinking, I don't have what I used to have. But God will always supply what you need. He knows what you need. A lot of people are transient today, especially those in the military, and they think, I'm only going to be here for 2 years. I understand that. When I was a kid, we moved 13 times from when I started elementary school to I graduated high school. And that creates something in a family. It creates this feeling of transitory, so you don't really connect with people. You don't get involved. We need to be involved with other Christians. You need a Timothy in your life. You might want a Paul, but you may need a Timothy. And perhaps you need to be a Timothy for somebody else. Be there for somebody that God has opened that possibility for you. So in your life, and I'm speaking especially to men today, okay? Because I think a lot of men, it's hard for us to connect with folks. And it's easy to get just know a lot of people, but never really plug into somebody. Listen, don't let your life go by. Invest in somebody. Invest in a relationship with somebody. Be there for them. Help them through those things. Not only will it change your life, it will change their life. And I pray that will happen. That's latch on your Timothy. 3, remember, your perseverance encourages others. When you persevere and get through things, that encourages other people to get through things. In verse 7, Paul says, therefore, brothers and sisters, in all our distress and persecution, we were encouraged about you because of your faith. All the other towns around talked about what was going on in Thessalonica. There's something going on in that church. And then in verse 12, he says, may the Lord make your love increase and overflow for each other and for everyone else, just as it does, as ours does for you. Paul is saying your faith has become known everywhere, and so keep doing that. Keep pouring that out to each other. And it's an encouraging thing to see that happen. I was running this by our new office administrator, a young fella, Mike, and he went to Southeastern Seminary not long ago. And he shared with me that in his first class in seminary, the teacher gave him these statistics. He said, do you know that everybody that starts seminary, only 50% of you will finish seminary? And then he said, in the next 5 years, only 50% of those will stay in the ministry. In the next 10 years, only 50% of those. And so he whittled it down that in 30 years, there's only be like 1% left in the ministry. And he told me that story, and I thought, oh, I'm going to use that. But then I also thought, you know, sometimes people get statistics wrong. Can you believe it? So I looked it up. He was wrong. That is not true. In fact, you'd be surprised at how many people who went into the ministry are still in the ministry. And that is inspiring to me. I've heard people tell me 1,700 pastors a month are quitting in the world. I don't know where that came from. It's not accurate. In fact, most pastors are in it for the long run. Lifeway did a research on this, and their latest statistics they got was 95% of pastors feel happy that they've been called into ministry. That's inspiring to me, that they're still at it. And I look at some of y'all, and I know how long you've been involved in the church and working in the church. I don't know when you graduated seminary, Dick, but it's been a couple of years, hasn't it? At least 10. And you're still in it. He's still in it. There's many other people. I know some of you have been involved in church. I don't want to ask you, Charlie, how long you've been a deacon, but it's been a couple of years, hasn't it? 54 years. 54 years. And there are others of you. I could point out many of you and say, look, they inspire us because they've been in it for so long. Somebody said once that to quitting is for cowards. Kind of rough language. But it's true. And there's times when you may feel like it. About, I guess, 7 years ago, I stopped quitting on Monday mornings. You know, sometimes you have a rough weekend, and you come in on Mondays and you think, boy, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But I quit quitting. And you know, I really love what I do. I'm glad to do it. Now, it's not always easy, but I'm inspired. I'm part of an email group where I get emails from other pastors on the peninsula on how they're handling the COVID situation. And a lot of them handle it different. There are churches meeting at different times in different places. Some of them are helping other churches. Some of them combined. but I have not found one yet that's quit. That's inspiring to me. It's inspiring to see how people are hanging in there and toughing it out and getting through this, because your perseverance encourages other people. And that's a good thing about a church that's been here for a while, because we have folks that have come before us. And on this Sunday, which is the homecoming Sunday, we remember what happened in 1903 when this church was founded. And this was all woods back then, by the way. This was the country. They put in a second stoplight down the road. So I have to go through 2 stoplights to get to church now. I'm not happy about that, by the way. But it used to be this was a dirt road. In 1903, this was a dirt road, and this was not Williamsburg. This was the country. And this little church that started here, there's a bell curve in churches. You know what a bell curve is? It starts out here, and it has a climb that it's going well, and then eventually, after a certain amount of time, it plateaus, and then it declines. You know what a miracle is? Our church is not in decline. And we started in 1903. And it's by God's grace that we are here, and the faithfulness of the people who've come before us. And we're encouraged by them. If you're not encouraged by who came before us, I need to wake you up to that. The Ann Prices, the people who've come before us that were people of great faith, that the Ridenours, the people who were here before us, and they come alongside us today, and they inspire us to do more. Paul said this. He closes out the chapter. He says, "May the Lord make your love increase and overflow for each other and for everyone else, just as ours does for you." To have this inspiration in your life, even though you go through trouble. The real news today is that trouble is going to happen. It's going to happen to your life. It's going to happen to my life. If you think that it's not going to happen because you are a faithful Christian, it's just not true. I wish that life was all roses, but it's not. It doesn't matter who you are. You're going to go through hard times, but God is there for you to get you through them. And He'll give you a Timothy. He might not give you a Paul, but He'll give you a Timothy. And your perseverance can encourage other people to do more and to be more than they